Are you wondering what networking is going to look like this year and how to adapt and make it all work in an ever-changing environment? Come join us on this episode where we talk to two guests who are masters at networking and masters at adapting the way they connect with others. And we'll do it right now on this episode of Word of Mouth.
Get ready to improve your mindset, increase your skill set, and expand your network. Follow along as the CEO of Master Networks brings you over a decade of business networking experience. Welcome to Word of Mouth with Chaz Wilson. So ultimately, I'm starting with so again, like I always do. I think that ultimately what this year has been, regardless of good, bad, any adjective in between, is a learning experience for all of us in our personal lives, in our relationships, in our businesses. So I know different areas around the country have had different reactions to COVID, to coronavirus. So I think I kind of want to start with seeing how you, with a national organization, have adapted in this environment just overall.
Yeah, so I think the interesting thing is when we first started hearing about coronavirus, I had just come back, when we'd heard about it, I was in New York, did a presentation. I went out to West Texas, I did a presentation there, and really no problems, no issues, but it started to really pick up. And most places started to close down, 14 days, flatten the curve, a lot of that extend it, governor's orders started coming out, all of those kinds of things. And it was different across the country. And so none of us had been through that. None of us knew what was going to happen. So we're trying to navigate it to the best we could. I think a lot of organizations, we moved quickly to the best that we could, but we're just trying to figure it out. And then there became like this, there's like different phases of it.
Of course.
Right? There was the initial, what do we do now? How do we, adapt? We had to cancel, or we first postponed our event Connect, and then we canceled it, and, et cetera. But then there became this phase of like, all right, surely soon this will, we'll get back to normal.
This is before this became the new normal.
Right. And so then it became, okay, what happens if it doesn't? And we've got to get better at this. And so I think the phase we're in right now presently is, what if this continues for a lot longer? And how do we adapt to getting really good at those things, because it could be much longer? And I think that's just kind of the way we're looking at it right now.
I remember those initial conversations too, when this had first started and there wasn't a lot of known components to it. I remember all those meetings about what should we do, where should we go from here. And a lot of the time it had like a deadline set to it, like, within like the next 6 months we should be able to go back. And now we're looking at 2021 and what everything looks like then.
Right. And then you also have to balance, because what we're talking about today is business.
Right.
And there's an impact to business. And so then there becomes this discussion of like, okay, how do I balance safety, government orders and mandates, and making money and adapting my business? And I think we're going to cover all of those things today. And the good news is that we're going to get different perspectives, because remember, what it's like for you, where you're listening today, what it's like for you, it may not be for someone else in a different state, in a different area. Even counties are different. We're noticing even in
within
Texas,
the same state,
even within the same state, some counties, Colorado was much like that. And talking to our partner there, different counties were treating it differently in the way that they could open. I just read something about, I can't remember where it was, but one state where the city lines kind of cross through. And so you have one side of the city that kind of goes into the other state, or that side of it. So you could literally, where you're at home, you have one mandate, and you drive across 30 minutes to work and you have a completely different mandate.
Yeah.
And so like how they were dealing with that was just kind of crazy.
There's no right way to deal with it, honestly.
Yeah.
But so while we talked a little bit about how you handle it from like a national organizational standpoint, we have two guests on today that'll talk about their individual areas and kind of where they're at now versus where they see themselves next year.
Yeah, it's going to give us great perspective of what this means for networking and connecting with others from a business perspective as we look to really here in 2021.
So, and even further than that too.
Right. All right, let me introduce our guest today. I'm going to introduce first our regional partner from New York, Tina Campbell. Welcome to our show, Tina.
Hey, Tina.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Fortunate to have both of them with us, but our second guest is our regional partner in South Florida. So welcome Brian Solt to our show.
Hello, guys. Thanks so much for having me here.
Yeah,
it's
of course.
a pleasure to be here.
Tina, tell us how long you've been a member of Master Networks, and then we'll go to Brian.
Since 2013.
Wow, 2013. So that's, I mean, you've seen a lot in since 2013, almost from the beginning when we started in 2011. So, Brian, how about you?
Actually, the same. I became a member with Master Networks in February of 2013.
Wow, I didn't realize it was so close
I
together.
know.
Yeah, I didn't either. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how your memory when you go back in timelines and how everything comes together. But so you two were listening to what we were talking about here a minute ago, and I'd love to get your insight on just sort of like tell us about what the initial for you was like when we went into isolation and quarantines in local areas, what you did to adapt, and then what's it like right now. Brian, let's start with you in Florida. Like, tell us a little bit about kind of that process, what it was for you.
Sure. Yeah. I know. I was really nervous. I was curious what the future of Master Networks would be. I was concerned with my income levels, with everything shifting. So with Master Networks, I mean, we're all about relationships, meeting in person, socializing, groups of people. And then Florida, I think it was in the beginning of March, went on a stay-at-home order. And I remember thinking about like what's going to happen, moving forward, and how long is this going to be? And are we going to lose members? And if we do, are they ever going to come back?
Right.
And at that time, it was great because we were able to adapt. We've already been using online tools, with Master Networks. We're all across the country, and we had been using Zoom for our regional calls on a regular basis. And so immediately we shifted right from meeting in person to meeting on Zoom. And I think we did that faster and quicker, and we're more responsive than a lot of the other networking groups that were out there. So I think a lot of groups that were out there shifted, didn't meet for a couple of weeks, and then started adapting to the online technology where we were already on that path. So it was just really kind of a place of just being concerned, and unsure and unaware, and then immediately seeing that we were able to continue online. So that was more relieving to have that technology on hand.
I can imagine.
Yeah, what's it like right now? Give us just a sense of what present day your area is like right now.
Yeah, so here in Southwest Florida, so it's according to county for the most part. We have a lot of our chapters in Lee County. We have some other chapters in Collier County. We're all meeting in person now. We've set guidelines for the region as far as masks are recommended but not mandatory, and we ask that they set chairs 6 feet apart when we meet. It doesn't happen. You get groups of people that come together and they are sitting close. So we have groups that are meeting out there, and we're just paying attention. Who's sick? People are, if they have symptoms, they stay at home. We're flexible with everyone. So we have some groups that are hybrid. Some are meeting online, where half the groups meeting in person. And really we've adjusted to accommodate the members. What are they looking for? And a lot of people are raising their hands and wanting to meet in person again. And so we allowed them to do that. And so far, things have been working out smoothly. We haven't had any major issues with anyone. If someone did test positive for anything, they isolated for 2 weeks. We gave them that flexibility, and no one has seemed to raise alarms or concerns that have been meeting in person. And then I've got other meetings where the entire group wanted to continue to stay virtually, and so we're giving them that opportunity. So it's being flexible, I think, is the key piece of it.
So even though you're let's say open for business, if you will, a little more than what we'll hear from Tina in New York, you're still providing options for people for based on their comfortability and to be safe.
Comfort, safety concerns, absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
I feel like you have to offer them those options, though. I mean, even moving past this into next year and on, I feel like those options should probably be permanent.
Yeah. Yeah, Tina, tell us about what kind of that same history for you in New York and how that went for you and what it's like right now.
Well, so it is different. The first we started hearing about it was that we became an epicenter here, and everyone heard about the town of New Rochelle. It had the National Guard, come around and put a quarantine area of like a mile wide. Well, my chapter that I had just started a couple weeks before that was within that 1 mile radius.
Wow.
So, I was there the week before, and we just didn't know what any of this looked like. So I remember starting to hear from our governor that we were, going to be staying at home. And I thought to myself, I can't put people in the way of this. I want to put myself in the way of that. And I ended up having bronchitis at the same time. And I was like,
Oh
what's
no.
happening here? Wasn't sure whether, did I have something? Nobody knew. So I remember that week, I really started to, I just kind of went inside and started thinking about what should I do. And then I remembered, I said, you know what? I said, I've been doing Zoom regional calls for, it turns out, I thought it was a year. And my area director said, no, you've been doing it for 2 years. And I was like, wow. So we were actually, and Brian was at some of my meetings. I invited whoever would come, and, we didn't have a great following, but I already knew how to use the technology. So I basically said to myself that week, heck no, I'm not going to lose everything I worked for,
Right.
however many years to this. And so what can we do? Because we need each other. So one of the things that we did in New York was that we huddled together. We brought everybody together and said, we're here, we're going forward. And then we split people out. We had kind of a plan where we split, first we huddled as we forgot about the exclusivity for a month or two and just said, look, just come together. Everybody became very close, really helped the sense of community. We listened to what our, the fears and the, what people, the support that people needed in their individual businesses. So we were really on that. And then we said, okay, after a while, we said, all right, now it's time to split apart and go into like the smaller groups of the chapters. And that's what we did. And then we also checked on leadership. Some leadership, was not really interested in going forward with Zoom. Said, oh, no problem. So, some changes had to be made, but we really did it on a week by week basis. We actually have a forum where we meet still weekly, and we talk about what does the health department say, what does the governor say, what can we do, what venues are still open. We don't really know what the next iteration of this is going to look like, because we don't even know if our venues still exist. So we actually watch it on a week by week basis, and that's what we are still under 6 feet distancing. So, if you have a group of 20 and you all need, 6 feet, that's a ballroom.
Right.
So, what we're saying is that stay the course. We're here. You have a lot of opportunities. As I mentioned, I think to the group before, that we've had people from Europe, Australia coming to visit us. So the opportunities abound to be in where we are right now. And that's the silver lining in this.
So just to hit on that, I mean, COVID has opened up opportunities for businesses and people that they didn't have before, as you just mentioned. I know we have a Master Networks chapter in Texas, so we have people in Arizona who joined so they could do it virtually and get to know it before it opened in Arizona, where we may not have had that opportunity in the past. And I think that's what you're saying, Tina, is, people from Europe being able to join your chapter virtually because of the ability to switch. So here's what I'd like to ask sort of the group. I mean, these changes at first felt temporary, then they felt a little longer than temporary, whatever that looked like. And now it feels like, I'm not saying necessarily permanent because things will change and it's fluid, ongoing. But what does it look like here in the year 2021? What does it look like how does one adapt as a business owner for networking? Like, how do we navigate that?
For me, and as I was thinking, as we were sharing and as Tina was talking here, and it's continuing to be flexible with that, right? As a business owner as well. Like, I know for a lot of people, they don't like being on the Zoom calls. It's not as personal, right? You lose a certain touch. We talk about, like, with some of the meetings, as soon as the meeting's over, boom, like, you're no longer connected with each other. Where when you're meeting in person, there's that chance to connect with someone, maybe go have coffee and continue that conversation on a little farther. But it's being flexible on that and being open to, okay, maybe I can go visit some meetings in person here and being online in other areas. And us as putting that, creating that environment where people can connect, it's continuing to do that. And that was a big piece for me. Once we continued on with the Zoom, it was really enlightening to see that these businesses were able to continue to pass referrals, continue to share. They still had someone they could reach out to it could get really isolating when you're staying at home. All of the restaurants were closed, retail was
Right.
closed, people were on top of each other with family, and it was an outlet. Even if it was sitting at your computer for a little bit, you were still seeing these friends that you had every week. And so it gave some light at the end of the tunnel and some relief. So staying hopeful, right? Just like Tina said, like just stay the course, right? Continue moving forward, take it one step at a time, and not just getting lost and despair or what's going on. And I feel confident. I feel confident that we'll be in a space where everyone's meeting again. And I'm excited to see now that people have adapted to the online technology and seeing each other online and using Zoom and whatever other type of video conferencing that's out there. I think that we'll see more of that moving forward as well. Like businesses are closing now, right? Where their employees are working from home. And so it'll save on overhead in that sense. So I think we're going to see a lot of change on the other side of this and for the good. And I think we'll really appreciate that personal connection even more on the other side of this as well.
Yes, I agree. I agree totally. I believe that, yes, we're two-dimensional instead of three-dimensional right now, but we have worked so hard to keep the groups together, to keep the value of networking and what it can mean. We've added, we call it the Master Networks Cafe, so that afterwards people like stick around in the Zoom, and just talk.
I love that.
We've added our workshops that we do quarterly here, using our Master Networks people to be the facilitators, and so there's so many things that we're trying to do, is to open up as many opportunities as possible while we're in this state of being. And we can't stop, and I think that's just going to keep opening. I mean, I think that I remember when I was talking to people in North Jersey who would never come over to New York because it was a bridge, and they just never would. They're best friends now. I mean, these people are not just being, and because of the situation, they're not just doing business together, they're doing life together. And I'm hearing that they're doing a mastermind together, and it's okay. I don't need to control everything. They're doing masterminds, they're talking, they're having mixers, they're doing all kinds of things to adapt. And I think that I don't know if I want to go back to completely meeting totally in person, because of the opportunities that this provides. So I think, again, stay the course for here. I tell everyone, just keep going, because honestly, what's the choice do we have here right now in New York? If you want to meet people, this is the place to come. And it's really amazing.
Yeah, I mean, the way that we've adapted and the way that we've done things to pivot in a this kind of environment, I think is pretty remarkable. And yet, at the same time, I want to make sure those listening who, yes, it's opened up opportunities, and the one thing I would just encourage people listening to remember. So if you're listening to this and your business has been impacted, or your job or your spouse or whatever, understand that I think there's a problem that could exist if people are waiting for something. Like, I'm waiting for someone or something to come fix this. I think that's a tragic mistake. I was just reading Brookings University talked about Chapter 11 bankruptcies way up this year. Small business revenues down over 20% just since January of 2020. There's real impact that's happened to the economy, and probably, frankly, we haven't seen yet the truth, because we're still in it, right? There's going to be a ripple effect. So knowing that's the probability of what things are going to happen, what advice should we be talking about for entrepreneurs right now, and especially leaning into that network as we go throughout the year, and how can they make those changes? What should they be doing right now?
Yeah, for me, I think that as entrepreneurs, as local business leaders, right, as business professionals, it's just right now staying open, staying connected with other individuals rather than isolating, right? Working together, being flexible, and like you used a key word there, right? Pivoting. Things next year might not look like 2019, right? And then we've had 2020, which has just been, I'm ready for it to be over. And going into 2021, it's going to look completely different, and it's going to continue to change, right? And now I think we're going to be more aware too of like what's coming soon. Are we going to be, on edge? Like next time someone sneezes, is there something else that's going to come afterwards? And just being ready to adapt, being adaptable, being open, being flexible, and staying connected, I think are key things coming into 2021.
Yeah, Brian, I want to make a comment to what you just said. So I think like one of the things too is I think for a long time I felt like, yeah, man, could 2020 just be done? Like I would just be ready for it. And in looking back to, I think one of the lessons I've learned that I feel like I probably needed to do a better job of was to go, okay, this is where I am. We made a lot of changes, a lot, and we adapted, but instead of that, just really looking for the opportunities as Tina was just talking about, because, they're there. You got to look for them, but they're there, right?
And Chaz, you can use your network. That's what's so great about it. You have an idea, or you even go to a network and say, I need some help. I need, what other things can you help me think of that I can do? And we had a videographer that did in our groups that he did mostly weddings. So you could imagine that those stopped for him very early on, March, April. Anything, forget it. So he basically, what he did was he became, and his partner, video animation, for businesses in their marketing. And it's amazing what they do now. And he's never going back to doing weddings.
Right.
That's awesome.
So, he's like that, they are using themselves, their creativity, and enjoying, what came about. And he said it was all because of, Master Networks and the group that just maybe, that was I believe someone gave them the idea, but I also know there's just the support that they've gotten through, building this new business, and they're really excited. And I've seen that how many times over. It's just that if, as you said, people that said, oh, I'm going to just go hunker down until this is over, well, we don't quite know when that is. So, time's a wasting. I remember, I think it's my mantra is like, get busy, right? Get busy, get into action. And so you can fall forward, right? And you can move forward in ways that you just didn't even know. And that's why that has been, as I said, the silver lining. We've grown in New York. Our networking, I don't know if it's like 15-20% here. We grew in New York during this time, the region, because people needed something, and they still are going to continue to need that going forward.
That's entirely what your network is for. So.
Right. I mean, it's remarkable. So I'm going to give you an example. It's not necessarily somebody in Master Networks, but a good friend of mine, their family, his wife's family, they own a dog. I want to say it's like a retreat. It's like a resort. So instead of just boarding your dog when you go, they have like water fountains and this big acreage and stuff you take your dogs to. But because of COVID, people weren't bringing their dogs. And so they immediately had to adapt. And I think that most businesses can. I'll tell you what they did here in a second. But, I feel bad for people who are very boxed in, like restaurants. There's not a lot they can do. I mean, I recently saw some restaurants in New York there, in New York City, kind of coming out publicly and saying, enough. We cannot stay shut anymore and support our families. And so, this family, they decided to, instead of the dog park, they went out and bought a commercial oven because their kitchen oven wasn't going to work anymore. But they had built a network of 300,000 followers on Facebook. And one day they said, listen, we're going to sell 3 dozen cookies for $100 and we'll ship them to you. And they, for like 16 hours straight, and they made over like a 3-month period, they made like $60,000 selling cookies because they built a network, a dog resort to selling cookies.
That's not where I thought the story was going to go.
Right. But they adapted. They just said, what could we do right now to make money, right? What could we do? So I think, for all of us, it's really creative thinking if we're in business. Now, that being said, I'm going to share another stat with you guys that I think is kind of interesting. And that is that let me share this right here. Where is it? New business entity formations fell off in the spring, obviously, of 2020, right? That makes sense. But are now on track to outpace recent years. So why do you think that is?
Well, I was just going to share that too. Like in the beginning, when all this started, it was really sad to see there were businesses that were closing up. There were businesses I was driving down the road that the signs were gone from the windows. And
Yeah.
so I just remember being like, man, it's a shame to see all of these businesses closing because, everything's shutting down. But within the network group, also on the flip side of that, there's a woman in our group. She does HR. Well, she was working for a corporation for years and years and years, and she got laid off, but she still needed bills to pay. So she started her own personal HR company, and she plugged into our network group, and every day she praises it because of the resources she's getting access to, the people she's connected with. But now she's starting up her own business. There's another woman who's an attorney. Same thing. She left a corporate job and decided to start her own thing. So I've been seeing these people, again, individuals being adaptable and starting their own thing, shifting into it. So I think, like you're saying, right, the one company shifted from being a dog, resort, right, to selling cookies. So I think more people are leaving the corporate world and starting to work for themselves, being self-sufficient, right, being dependent on their own skill set to make things happen one way or another. I think they can be more flexible on their own than in a corporate world as a whole.
And I was going to say, Brian, I think that's absolutely true, because also people that were either furloughed or laid off realize they don't necessarily want to put all of their eggs in the basket for, a company or a particular type of business, that they almost like, you know what, I'm going to start even a side hustle right now so that I'm not going to be in this position again. And I think that's where you're really seeing some people thinking outside the box and looking at what they're passionate about and what skill set they have in order to maybe get out from that job they didn't like so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say too, like and I have friends who've been laid off, and the challenge is, now they're looking at, they've worked themselves up in a career where they're at an age and a pay range where most companies aren't going to now go invest, and there's very limited opportunities, high level CFOs and other things, like they can't find work. They can potentially at 50% the pay that they've been at. And so now they're looking at, what do I do? And I just want to say, if you're listening to this, really consider this. If you have ever considered reinventing yourself, this is the best time to do it, because like so many people are, so you're not alone. And I think for all of us who maybe aren't in that situation, it's important to encourage our friends and others who are in that stage, like, this is a great time to reinvent. We believe in reinvention all the time. And so that could be not just your business, but yourself.
Right.
And to Brian's point, I think there's people who got laid off and are now considering a business that they never did before. And so if they are, this is all the more reason they should plug into something like Master Networks to, number one, connect with people and learn business skills. Because if you haven't done this before, this is a tough path to go by yourself. In fact, I would even say nearly impossible to do by yourself, to run a successful business. So just like, this is the time to come connect with a group of people that can really support you in that process. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this past week, it's actually great to get feedback on our training. But there's two people that they're independent business owners, right, running a service one way or another. And we did the 135 GPS, and within this past week, two people specifically have shared that how impactful that particular lesson was for them to sit down, write out their goals, get clarity on what they're going to do. And this week's follow-up to that, talking about staying focused, right? Learning to say no, and knowing what your goal and your vision is, and identifying those distractions keeping you from that, so that you can say no from it. And so the training that they're receiving, just part of networking, right? Part of the relationships that are in there is really making an impact, especially on the new business owners, the first timers here.
Yeah, it's very timely right now, going back to what you said before, Chas, about now's the perfect time to reinvent yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the things with our training, what's been really interesting with the Zoom world, is I think it's just almost been more impactful, because we have our PowerPoint trainings that we show people, and we listen to the voices from the headquarters at Master Networks University. And I think we've really, because we're in these boxes, we actually been more focused on the words and the training. So I think it's been even more impactful than ever.
Yeah, I agree. it's going to be interesting to see how things continue to evolve and how, how people adapt to the ever-changing climate that they're in for their business. And I think, you're seeing across the country, it's a volatile time in our economy, but I think it's a volatile time in people's behavior and in the way they're acting. And I think, so two things. I think what you're seeing is, I just saw some things with some friends of mine in California who there's a group that's all rallying together in the restaurant business, and they're going to open, and they're like, we don't care. We're going to open. And because, and you probably saw in the news, some of them, they like had film production studios across the parking lot were having big tents set up for food, and yet the business restaurant in the same parking lot was not allowed to open. And so you're starting to see this kind of like thing where they're going, wait, how come they can, but we can't? And so there's that piece of it. But then on the other side of it, I would say this, and my advice would be as a business owner and just as a human to just be thinking about this, like whether you agree or disagree with someone's stance of them opening or not opening, the key to remember is that's a decision they're having to make. And in most cases, we don't know all the reasons why they're having to make it. When you see a business owner that's maybe defying an order to open, it's like, well, gosh, it'd be really easy to say, you should shut down. But when they're feeding their kids and they're doing what they can, there's always more components to that story, or vice versa. If somebody, it's the other side of it too. So I think that that's just the piece. And we as a community, Master Networks in particular, we have an opportunity to bring business owners together who are of, different, economies, different political opinions, different everything, and come together to support business communities however they have to adapt, right?
Well, Chaz, I remember years ago when you first started Master Networks, you always said you don't know about the conversations that people are having at the dinner table to keep the lights on. I'll never forget that. And that was so powerful. And never has it been more true than now that the conversation is, what should we do? What should we do to go forward? Is this against, the state mandates, whatever, I just say that we're a non-judgmental zone here. And all we do is, how can we help you? How can we support? What can we do? And sometimes they just need somebody to, sometimes it's a group think tank even, on how to pivot and all that. But I just want to say that it's like now more than ever, this is necessary.
Yeah, I would say more than ever, we're built for this. Like this is exactly what Master Networks is built for, to help people in times like this. So I just want to thank our guests, like awesome feedback and tips and help for our guests. Tina, Brian, thank you for being part of this episode and doing all that you do to support business owners in the state of New York and the state of Florida.
We're so happy to have you on today.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure. It's always great to see you guys and connect too.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I love what Tina brought up when she was saying that they are still trying to find ways to facilitate those personal connections, even though they're through a screen. And then Brian had brought up adapting and just continuing to adapt into the new year, into the years to come. But what does a business owner need to do if they can't adapt? Because I feel like that's a very real possibility in this climate right now.
Yeah, and I have my own personal opinions of it. I think if it was me in that spot, which I think having my own show here gives me the liberty
yes,
to answer that question.
Yes, this is exactly where you talk about it.
I just here's the thing I think about it. And I've been in positions not because of a pandemic where, I didn't have any money, and I had, I recently shot an episode with my wife where we talked about we just didn't have anything, and you have to do what you have to do to provide. And so I feel for these people who are in this spot. But the one advice I would give them is no one's coming to save you. And I love the quote that, and I'm going to not get it right, but I think it was Ronald Reagan said the 9 scariest words are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And the government's not going to come help save your business. Yeah, there might be PPP loans and other things to balance through it, but like you've got to find a way. And that's why I see business owners across the country opening up regardless of mandates. Because they see government officials go, well, you're telling me one thing and you're doing another. Why is it that every hair salon's closed, but you can go get your hair, you can get it opened for you and go get a haircut or whatever it is. It's just as examples, right? And I know, that was Nancy Pelosi that did that, but I'm just using it as an example. Like people, it's real. When you put people in a position where they can't feed their family because you've told them they are non-essential and they have to close. I'm sorry, but my business right here, if you did that to me, this is essential for me. And yes, there's safety and I get that, but find ways to operate safely. We're doing other things safely. Why can't we operate a business safely?
Adapt in that regard.
Yeah.
I gotcha.
mean, if you're a business owner that's been shut down, you got to find a way to adapt. You have to. I don't believe you just roll over and say, great, we're closed. Find a way. Push the limits. I love these guys we had on my previous podcast that we talked about in New Jersey with the gyms.
Oh, that's right.
Ian Smith just said, screw it. I'm going to open my gym. You can come arrest us. And they did. They arrested him a few times. They're like, we cannot put ourselves out of business. We do it safely. We, have protocols, and they've shared their stats on social media. But man, you got to do what you got to do, to make money and support your family.
Right.
It's
your livelihood. It's your future.
Right. And here's the other side of it. So think about it this way. And this is just my opinion. What is a life worth living if I have nothing to live for and do? Like if I'm isolated, I'm losing my job, I have no income, I can't see my family, I can't do this, all for, in my opinion, for a greater good of being safe, I don't have a life worth living. And so it's important for me to go out and do the things and providing for my family is job number one. And I feel for business owners who are in that spot. They're balancing this moral dilemma. Be safe, and follow the rules to what they've been given and provide. And so it's a tough decision every day, but I can just tell you, no one's going to come fix that for you. You have to do it yourself. That's a tough spot to be in. I get it.
Right.
So, I think, if you're in this spot, you need to connect with people who will support you too, because your network has never been more important.
We talked about it during the episode today with Tina and Brian.
Yeah.
So on today's episode, technology was brought up quite a bit. So my question today is, what problems do you think that technology will solve in the next 5 years compared to the problems it will create?
Ooh. One of the problems we've already kind of seen fixed, solved, even though it's not really a problem, is being able to cross the boundaries of state lines, of country lines, and to connect on a deeper level with people outside your local areas. So that's not necessarily a problem that needed to be fixed, but something that technology has allowed for.
Yeah, I think there was a book called, I may not have it right, but I think it was called Megatrends, and it talked about the next big thing would be the evolution of high tech and high touch. Mm-hmm. And so the thing I think about is you can automate tasks, but you can't automate the relationship. And so I think the problem is, and you see this, is that younger people tend to think technology sort of develops and automates the relationship. And I think that will be the problem continually. We'll adapt. It'll be like the new norm, but I think it'll still be a problem of people who struggle to have real depth in relationship because they think that technology's the way to do it. I will say that the principles of building your network and connections will be the same. The mechanism in which we do it may change a little bit with technology.
Yeah, I can see that. I feel like for one, you have to sacrifice the other, like to bridge these gaps between like oceans, stuff like that. You're going to have that less, less of a touch. So yeah, I feel like they don't go hand in hand.
Yeah, so people will find the way. Look, video technology's allowed families to connect across the country, across the world.
Which I guess was a problem over the past year. So.
But I think when people rely on the technology to keep the relationship going, that's the problem.
I gotcha. Yeah, I completely agree with that.
The mechanism, the platform in which you continue to keep it. So.
Yeah, agreed.
Good question.
That was a good question. Next week on Word of Mouth.
What would you do if you were dropped off in a city you didn't know? Here you go, here's $100. What would be like the first things you would do? So think about your Instagram. Think about all the people you're following. Now my list is higher than 20. It's about 100. Mm-hmm. But basically everyone in there, those 100 stories are people I'm following because they're in my top 100 now. How do we find out who we need to know?